Thanks you all, and thank you, Ken, for sponsoring this event. I met Paul in spring of 2009 at the Esalen Institute on the Pacific Coast, where a small conference was being held, a gathering of people who care deeply about the alternative spiritual culture. It was just a few months before my first book, Occult America, came out, and it was a few months before Paul's first book, As a Channel, I Am the Word, came out. And the theme of the conference was, how can those of us who care deeply about the alternative spiritual tradition find ways to talk about it more clearly, more decisively, more maturely, not to get lost in catechism or not to get lost in fallback phrases, and to really elevate our sense of what we are doing. We are an American and international spiritual tradition. And I was so moved by Paul's presence, as I know all of you will be tonight, because here was a man who, up until that point in his life, had been a fairly widely produced and successful playwright. He had faculty appointments at NYU and Goddard College. He had a distinguished academic background, and he was, in effect, coming out publicly for the first time as a medium or a channeler. And for those of you who are involved in academia know, the surest path to tenure is not to declare yourself a denizen of the occult. And another thing that touched me about Paul at that meeting, and that I was actually touched by in the presence of everybody who was there, and this is so important about Paul, and you'll get a sense of this as well tonight, is that he doesn't run away from any of the mystical or esoteric associations that come with his work. There's a great bravery about Paul. I was so thrilled that when I first met him, he referred to himself as a medium. You know, too often we want to escape from the older terms because they assume baggage, and we get worried people are going to use them against us as epithets. I embrace all the old terms: New Age, occult, ESP, medium, witchcraft. I would apply these things to myself, and I learned long ago, as I'm sure many of you in this room have, that when you're into the mystical path, you're going to get called all kinds of names, and some of those names are going to be intended to communicate that you're unserious or sometimes sinister. My solution to that was to not only refuse to run from those terms, as Paul has, but to run towards those terms, because they have historical integrity, they have cultural integrity, and I'm interested in therapeutic spirituality. I would never be ashamed to stand up in a room anywhere and refer to myself as New Age. To me, that's a noble term, not a term that connotes anything unserious or that I need to run from. And Paul was so inspiring to me for being a man who had this career in theater, who had this career in academia, who wasn't running away from problems in outer life and was running toward labels like channel or medium that our culture tries to convince us to run away from. You'll hear for yourself tonight the quality of his work, and I have to say, and I felt this as I was seated upstairs, and I really mean it from the heart, I think years from now, you can sort of mark these words and, you know, send me an angry email if I'm incorrect, but I think years from now, you're going to be very glad that you, hey man, that you decided to come tonight and that you've had the opportunity to meet with Paul and the guides in this kind of an intimate setting. I really think that Paul's work is assuming right now, in the here and now, a kind of international prominence. I think we've gone through several different phases of channeled communication in the 20th and now early 21st century. Loosely speaking, I would say the first real public propagation of channeling came through Edgar Cayce. Another phase arrived through Jane Roberts and Course in Miracles. And I think the great third phase is happening right now through Paul, and you'll be witness to that tonight. Popularity is not an indication of truth, but everyone does need a constituency. Every artist, every communicator needs a constituency, and I've watched Paul's constituency grow from spring of 2009 to today, where there were actually more, and this is a fact, there were more advance orders for this new book on Amazon than Amazon had sold previously of Paul's foregoing book. So, you know, there's really there's really a growing constituency for this work, and I can say that feeling such a sense of joy and satisfaction, because this is an instance where truth is married to popularity. And I again want to tell all of you how much I think you're going to look back on this evening years from now and say, I'm so glad I had a chance to see this man and to hear this transmission in an intimate setting, because I think you're really witnessing something that's placing its imprint on our spiritual culture, and this is going to be a meaningful night for all of you. So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Mitch. I love the eye roll. So we're here tonight to celebrate the publication of the Book of Truth, which is just now released.
Yep.
This is the 5th book.
Yep.
Can you check your mic?
Is my mic on? Hello, hello?
Keep going.
Hello, hello?
Yeah?
Better?
We okay? All right, they the same level? Okay. No, I'm getting, no.
You can hear me,
Okay.
sort of? It's a bit of an echo on this mic.
Okay, what if you just turn me down a little bit? And can everybody hear over there okay? All right,
You all
cool.
right?
All right. So I'm assuming that many of the people here know your work, but we're also broadcasting out to Facebook Live. There are many people in our community, in the Evolver community, coming through the Alchemist kitchen, who may not be familiar with what you do.
Uh-huh.
And I was wondering if we might start with a discussion quickly, perhaps, about your process, how these books come to you, and you know, your relationship to the work that's coming through you.
All right. You know, I didn't plan on doing this. This isn't something that I thought I would be doing. And actually, the first book, which was I Am the Word, which was dictated through me in 2009, I didn't know was going to happen until 2 days before it began. I actually had just gotten canned from a playwriting job, and I'd gone to bed for 3 days. And a woman that I worked with at Goddard College phoned me and said, you know, Paul, maybe this would be a good time for you to write your memoir about how you became clairaudient, because I had been doing this work rather privately for quite some time. And I said, no, I have no interest in that. And the guides that I work with piped in and said, no, we have a book to write, and if you take 2 weeks, we'll do it. And at that moment, I sort of had nothing to lose. And I think that was the big change for me. I stopped caring long enough to allow this thing to transpire.
What is that thing?
The thing is a transmission. I mean, I operate like a radio. That's how I describe myself. So when I'm channeling, I'm taking dictation from the guides that work through me. So none of these books had anything to do with me sitting down at a keyboard. All of the manuscripts were dictated, and they're the oral teachings that are then transcribed. And then Mitch Horowitz, God bless him, has agreed that these should be published unedited. So these are the unedited transcriptions of these teachings. And it's been that way from the beginning. So I sit in a chair, I close my eyes, I have a bunch of iced coffee around me, I have Victoria Nelson on the phone in California, or now a group of people like this, because 100 pages of the Book of Truth was dictated before students at the Esalen Institute in a workshop. They just said, we're doing the book, and they just kept talking until they finished. But the process is I sit down, I close my eyes, I hear one phrase repeated insistently, And then when I give voice to that one phrase, everything else tumbles out behind it. And they continue until they're done. And then they'll usually say, stop now, please, or period, 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 which is the closure of the thought. So my job as the radio is to be present, and hopefully a clear enough channel that I'm not muddying the transmission. I have this sort of odd arrangement with the guides that I work with, which is if I disagree with something that they're saying, I've been known to say, wait a minute, or the guides will say, Paul is interrupting, and they'll take my question or my concern. Because even though I don't write the books, my name's on them, and I think I would feel pretty terrible if something were delivered out in the world with my name on it that I thought was just too insane.
Well, actually, the books are filled with, wait a minute, Paul does not agree with, Paul has a question.
Yeah.
Yeah, and actually, it's not as if you're articulating the question in the text. They catch the question, I guess, as you think it?
As I think it, yeah. For the most part, it's as I think it. The difference with the Book of Truth, which I found interesting, is because, I mean, in one of the books, two of the books, I actually interrupted the teachings so much that I think that they had to retool the entire chapter to accommodate my panicking. There was a thing in the Book of Mastery, which was published last year, where the guide said early in the book, nothing is real. And I went, I can get behind that. I've heard that before. And then the top of the next chapter, they said, well, here's the chapter for today. Everything is real. And I panicked because I thought that, they'd never really contradicted themselves in all of these texts, and now they have. And in fact, they hadn't. They explained their teaching very, very well once they got me sort of down from the metaphysical roof, which I was about to jump off of, because I thought the book was gone, because the rule is I can't change it. So if it comes out of my mouth, it's in the book. And I later learned that that's actually like a Meister Eckhart teaching from, the Middle Ages of, everything is real in spirit and nothing is real in form, which was actually what they were talking about. What they did in the new book, which was interesting, is they anticipated my interruptions before I actually interrupted, so that they kept the thing on track. So there are these things where they would say, Paul has a question. If I and my fellows are walking down the boulevard, I don't speak like that. That's how they talk. So they were sort of informing their acknowledgement of my concern and then addressing it in the context of the book. So it's actually a very, very uninterrupted transmission comparatively.
So I have to say that by nature, I am a skeptic.
Mm-hmm.
I'm an old punk rocker.
Yep.
I really am not into channeling stuff, particularly, right? And I've come to your work partially through my own bizarro spiritual experiences, I think like many people do, and start to be open to what you're presenting. But I need to understand better for myself what you think this is really all about. What is channeling?
I don't know what channeling is. It's not a phrase that I coined. It's actually something that I didn't necessarily believe in, and I thought was kind of hokey. And unlike Mitch, I was not a very good New Ager. And I used to actually, and my friend Jan is here. She was there in my original groups. I used to chain smoke out the window between channeling sessions. So I was not. Yeah. So I wasn't. It wasn't a very graceful thing. But channeling, to my understanding, is I am picking up on a transmission, no different than a radio broadcast, that's coming through for the purpose, in my case, of teaching others. My guides are teaching, they're here to teach, and I show up and we're here for the lesson together.
Now, you had been a psychic, doing psychic healings.
No, not really. Well, no, what I was when I was 25, and I was raised an atheist, and I was also a
Jewish
punk
atheist.
I was a punker. I wasn't. No, actually, my father was Jewish. My mother's not, so I don't qualify. Okay. But I had, it was '87, and I had, platinum blonde hair and Billy Idol hair. Those were the years. But I had a bit of an experience that really started to redirect my life, and then a bit of an opening.
Is there a feedback? Yes. What's going on with it?
We can trade mics if you want. We can just pass it back and forth if that's easier for people. But anyway, the long and the short of it is I studied a form of energy healing. as a way to get a context for this opening that I was beginning to experience. And it was the height of the AIDS epidemic in New York. And I got a call out of the blue to volunteer at a place that was providing services for people with life-challenging illness. And so I showed up because I had just studied and I figured I was supposed to do something with what I had studied. And when I had my hands on people, I started to hear things for them.
What do you mean hear things?
Well, it's if you can imagine having a thought that drowns out all of your other thoughts that isn't what you would normally be thinking. So if I have my hand on your neck and I hear the word Letitia, I don't know a Letitia, and there's no reason for me to think of that. So if I learn to say, who's Letitia, and you'd say my girlfriend, my dog, my wife, the person who beat me up when I was 10, and then that would prompt the energy to move. And as I began to trust that, I began to hear more. And I began to, initially I was hearing my clients. So when I work as a medium, I'm a medium for the living, which is kind of odd. So if you ask what's going on with your partner, I can step into your partner. I may start to resemble him or her and tell you what I hear. And I'm a bit like a switchboard going back and forth. So the guides play through me, and in those days I was hearing clairaudiently the client. But if you can imagine a thought that takes prominence, that drowns out everything else. I always say when I channel, it's like I'm climbing into the back seat of a car and I'm turning the steering wheel over to the guy that wants to come through. When I'm really out of the way, I'm in the back reading a magazine and I'm not paying much attention. I'm so busy keeping up the dictation because that's what it is. I'm doing stenography.
What does it feel like?
It's exhausting, truthfully, at a certain level. Physically, it's arduous for me, but some of this is just the way that I channel, which is not very graceful. I hear and I whisper the words as they come and I repeat them.
But you don't feel anything in your body? You don't feel
No, I do. I mean, oh yeah, my eye, I mean, there's trippy stuff, there's phenomena around this work. When I'm channeling, and the guides work one-on-one with people, which they often do in workshops, my eyes, I've been told, my eyes change color. They run very, very pale blue. And I have dark hazel eyes, you know, I mean, if you see them now. So I feel the energy, and when they're really working with me, I'm gesturing, I'm working as them. You see, I'm allowing, there's a whole vocabulary of symbols that comes through in gesture that I've now gotten comfortable enough that I can understand them. But I'm present, but I'm receded. But again, I'm so busy trying to keep up with the words, because I hear things a phrase at a time. And if anybody's seen me channeling, sometimes it's lightning fast. I mean, it's so fast, you can barely keep up with the transmission.
So how did you first become aware of the guides? How did they present themselves to you?
Well, I mean, it was a process over years. Initially, I had a little group that met in my apartment for 18 years. And I had people would show up and they'd put $10 in a basket, and we'd sit in a circle, and I would say what I was hearing. And so I understood that I was delivering information that wasn't my own because I didn't have a frame of reference for a lot of it. But I was much more interested in the energy that was coming through when I worked. Because there's energy that's very palpable that can be experienced. I mean, how many of you have taken a workshop with me at any time? I mean, and how many of you were able to feel the energy in the workshop? So it's something that happens on a regular basis. So I was more interested in that, the information. When I quit smoking finally, which was like 12 years ago, and I was like a 4-pack a day guy, my whole energy system changed, and that's when they began to lecture. And and then I didn't realize it. I just knew that I was speaking in paragraphs, or I was speaking in much, much longer chunks. And it wasn't until I started recording it, which was actually in 2009, right before the first book, that I began to type it up, that I began to really understand that what they were delivering was something much larger than I had been led to expect.
So I don't mean to take you down any, but I'm curious how you feel. It's like guides.
Yeah?
Are you the only person getting with guides?
No. Why would I be? I mean, I think this is important to understand. I don't think of myself as terribly special. I'm not a spiritual teacher, and I don't want to be a guru. I have no interest whatsoever. I'm present for this thing that happens in a shared circumstance. If I'm alone, I'm not going to be able to do this because I'm not going to listen to myself do it. I'm not going to like what I hear, more than likely. So there has to be some kind of audience present to be on the receiving end. And my agreement is to show up for that.
The reason I ask
Yeah.
is because, you know, as you get into any kind of sort of, you know, mystery school,
Yeah.
the work is often to open yourself to your guides or to your guardian angels or whatever terminology you want to use.
Uh-huh.
And then effectively we all have that access, but we don't all get books dictated to us.
Nor do I think we all need to, you know, and I think what's actually as valid as what I do, and perhaps more valid, is claircognizance, which is clear knowing, and people moving into their authentic knowing. You see, I've got this system where I hear stuff, which sounds kind of sexy, but it's yet to get me a date in my life. and what I'm doing is reiterating what I hear. There's a difference between fully knowing in your body and in your heart, and that's where my guides, I feel, are trying to direct their students, is to their own ability to know. I think being reliant on something outside of yourself, I think we all do have guides, but I can't tell you how many people that I meet in my work who are aspiring to that, I think, at the cost of knowing their own hearts. And I think that's...
Well, it does seem really cool to have this happen, right? So there's a sense of like, well, why don't I get a book channeled through me?
Well, I mean, I can tell you a few things. I had been a playwright, and I was used to the idea of assuming character or being assumed. And I was used to working in a light trance. I used to put on one piece of music on loop, back in the days of loop, for 4 hours at a stretch. And that's how I would write. So I was already inducing an altered state to work. What I didn't know was what I was doing. I didn't know that I could do anything that I do until I did it. So I didn't realize that I could step into other people until some woman came to talk to me in the guides, and she mentioned her father's name. And all of a sudden, I closed my eyes, and she gasped. And I said, "What's wrong?" She said, "Oh, my God, you looked just like him." And it was a bad relationship. And I found out that that can happen pretty much every time. And that's really just the fluidity of the exchange of energy. So I think that not everybody needs to channel a book, but, you know, not everybody needs to be a tennis pro. Somebody gets to do that. You know what I mean? It's just, we all have innate abilities, whatever they are.
So who are the guides?
They say that they're teachers. They have a very specific teaching, which is about the realization of the divine self, which is, they say, the truth of who and what. And they're really emphasizing the what now. And the Book of Truth is really the teaching of the what, the manifested divine as who you are. The first name that I was ever given back when I was in my early 30s, I heard the name the priest, then I heard high priest later. And the name that they use, and they use it, I don't like talking about the names because I feel that there's a level of ego attachment to names in this culture. And there's wonderful legacy in history, but there's also some spiritual materialism that gets caught up. The name that they finally said to use in the Book of Mastery, which is a name that I'd heard for some time, was Melchizedek, but that's a title and a priesthood as well as a being. And for whatever reasons, that's the name. I call them the guides, and they're known as the guides because my ex Larry, wherever he is in the world, I doubt he's watching Facebook Live, so I think I can talk about it. Larry used to say, when he found out I was a psychic, ask the guides this, ask the guides that. That's how they became known as the guides. And I'm more than happy with that because it doesn't carry with it a lot of baggage.
Melchizedek.
That's the name, yeah.
And that has a historical significance.
Yep.
Do you want to say what it is?
I don't know enough about it, truthfully.
So
I
that's
don't
a
know much
question,
more
that's
than what other people have Googled about it. Mitch may know, as an occult scholar.
Priestly order in the Old Testament.
The priestly order in the Old Testament.
Yeah.
Yeah. Did you?
Psalm 110, thou art a priest forever according to the order of Melchizedek. So it's a lineage.
It's a lineage.
It's a
That's
lineage.
exactly what I get as well.
And had you known the name before it came
I
to you?
did know the name before, and then that's one of the reasons I resisted it. Because anything and it's part of the reason I actually don't read a lot of other people's stuff, because I don't really want to be informed by it. So I suffer from a lack of information. There are people that I would love to read that I don't. But my job in some way, I feel, is to keep the channel kind of unimpeded. So when other people come to me and say, oh, other people are talking about what your guides are talking about, I'm actually relieved because it confirms it, because I'm actually not there reading other people.
Had you ever read the Bible?
Well, this is how the whole thing started, you know, in a weird way. I was doing this group in my apartment, and I had an active meditation process at that time. I was about 33 years old, and I was doing a lot of energy work. And I started to hear in meditation Jerusalem Bible, and I didn't know what it was. So I finally, after a few days, I went to a bookstore, and I said, is there something called a Jerusalem Bible? And there was. And it's a really wonderful translation from the Aramaic. It's not the King James thee and thou thing. It's very simple and very clear. And I got it, I took it home, and I said, now what? And I heard, read John aloud. And that was, in the beginning was the Word. And I spent 2 nights sitting up in bed reading this thing aloud. And then the very next group that I had, the guides that I work with, said, we're going to bring through the energy of the Word. And I kind of panicked, because this wasn't anything that I'd gotten from another teacher, nor did I believe it could happen. And I don't really come from this. And the Word as a concept, even though my guides have unpacked it at length in their books, is something that I still struggle with. But what they're talking about is the articulation of the divine in form as who and what we all are. And they say the Word is the action of the divine working as in through us. So that I did that reading, and it really, they brought through the attunement to the energy of the Word, which is the basis for all of the books that have followed. The first book was called I Am the Word, and it unpacks that.
So I Am the Word was the first of the 5
Yep.
so far.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned that there's going to be a 6th.
Uh-huh.
Hasn't happened yet.
It's due, Mitch is expecting it, so it's due by the end of November. I haven't started the sessions yet.
Okay.
I'm going to start, I think, in August. And each book takes approximately 30 sittings now to do, or 30 days worth of work. A sitting can be half an hour to an hour. So it actually takes longer to transcribe the books than it does to deliver them. So these things are really done, if you can imagine, over a period of hours. The whole books are delivered intact.
So the 6 books are really being conceived, have been conceived as a kind of set.
Yeah, I
Right.
think so. I mean, I know that this trilogy is. There's a teaching that they brought through in the 3rd book, and the teaching was, I know who I am, I know what I am, I know how I serve. And they say that's a claim that is made by the divine self, or the true self. The true self always knows who it is, and it knows what it is in the manifestation it's taken, which is you, all of us, and how we serve is how we're expressed. So that's the basic teaching. And the Book of Mastery, in many ways, is an unpacking of I know who I am. And the Book of Truth, much to my amazement, was the unpacking of I know what I am. When the I know what I am used to come through in my little group in my apartment, and my friend Jan will remember this, we used to say, what does I know what I mean? We got the who, and we got the idea of expression meaning service. And the guides would say inform, to be informed, the lives that you've created inform. The teaching of I know what I am really is, frankly, the teaching of the divine as you in the body you walk around in every day. And they say that we've kind of created this division. God is in the clouds and we're stuck in the mud. And they're saying God, or whatever you want to call God, is the mud, as God is the body and the sky and everything else. So the realization of the divine in all things has been their teaching from the beginning, and it's come in sequence. The next book, I think, they've given the title, and they stick with it. It's called the Book of Freedom. And I think that that's going to be the unpacking of service, of how we realize ourselves in the world as this vibration or consciousness. But that could change, I suppose, once they start to deliver it.
So the Book of Truth,
Yep.
the new book, can you tell us what the essence of this book is really about?
I can try. And it's one teaching. It's really one teaching that they say that truth is a vibration that is here. And they say in truth a lie cannot be held. And the truth of who and what we all are as the divine self, or the true self, or the eternal self, there's a name for it in every religion. It doesn't matter what you call it. That is the truth of who and what we are, and how we have misidentified is what is not true. And so what they're working with in this vibratory frequency, which is quite palpable, is the release of what is not true and a realignment to what is. And they actually say that everything, and they actually did, there's a channeling that's up online. I think you might have published it actually in Evolver.
Reality Sandwich.
In Reality Sandwich, 3 days before the election in a workshop in Virginia, they delivered a lecture on great change. And it was really sort of foretold much of what we're going through. It's a really interesting lecture. And it's up online, but they said that, if you look at truth as a wave, it's actually moving everything that is not moored in truth. And the way that we handle this actually is by aligning to and as truth. Because then when the wave comes, we're held in it. Now, this isn't an apocalyptic teaching. It really just means we're having to deal with our stuff. And I think individually and more importantly, collectively, because this is a collective event. This is actually something that they say is happening all over and in different ways.
Truth is a pretty charged word.
Yeah.
And one of the things I think that's interesting in this book is you actually, the guides, present the approach to truth by using kind of techniques of deconstruction to deconstruct our understanding of reality. So they which is generally an approach, and you're an academic, so you understand this probably better than me. It's an approach that moves towards relativism, subjectivity. Like you start to take these things apart, then what that idea that there is a truth underlying after you start to take apart your assumptions about what is. It was like an interesting contradiction potentially, or raised interesting questions for me. And I was wondering if you thought about that.
Well, no, I haven't.
Yeah.
But I can say, when I'm not the author of the book, I'm the scribe. But what I do know is that they say that what is true is always true. So the idea of a subjective truth or a temporary truth or a convenient truth goes right out the window here. And when they talk about truth, they're talking about what is always true.
But how do you know something is true?
How do you know something is true? I have to try to get this from them because I can't answer that.
Okay.
And I can go in there, and I may, because that's usually what happens when you don't know as a small self. Well, they're saying you don't know as a small self. The small self is impossibly known. It's impossible to know at that level what is true because the small self is invested, because the small self is invested and recognizes itself through the lies it's been taught, through the lies it's been taught, the true self that you are, the true self that you are, the authentic self you wish, or the authentic self, if you wish, recognizes truth because that's where he abides, because that's where he abides. This is in resonance. This is in resonance. You're thinking subjectively. You are thinking subjectively. How do I know this man loves me? How do I know this man loves me? This woman is my friend. This woman is my friend. That again, the small self. That is again the small self seeking to define itself, seeking to define itself through what it sees before him, through what it sees before him. The true self that you are. The true self that you are knows who he is, knows who he is in a higher way, and then understands everything he witnesses. Everything he witnesses in like vibration, So the quality of truth. So the quality of truth that you are espousing, is the convenient truth, is the convenient truth of recognition, I know that color is red. I know that color is red. You don't know that color is red. You only know that color is red because you told you what it was, because somebody told you what red was, and that is not true truth, and that is not an eternal truth. The divine as you. The divine as you is the truth of who you are, is the truth of who you are, and how you consider reality, and how you have constructed a reality outside of that. Outside of that is the challenge of your time, is the challenge of your time, the facing of the self and what it's created, and what it's created to perpetuate its existence. To perpetuate its existence, and what is being realized now is what is being realized now in a very different way, period.
So if the guides are saying
Yeah.
that you need to be in your divine self and not in your small self to recognize truth, how do you know when you're in your divine self?
Because the divine self knows and the small self thinks. It's really that simple. So the small self is the one that's trying to figure all the stuff out. The true self doesn't figure it out, the true self knows. And this is a basic teaching in all of their books. So, I mean, this is something that I do sometimes in a workshop. But if everybody just wants to try for a minute, just think of something think of a time in your life when you knew. I knew the relationship was over, I knew I was in love, I knew I was going to get fired, whatever it might be. Just think about that and see if you can remember how it felt to know. And once that's done, let's go to something that you all think. I think I know how long I'm going to live. I think I know what I'm having for dinner tomorrow night. I think I know what my best friend is doing who's not here with me. And see if you can feel the difference between knowing and thinking. See, when you think, there's always a question attached. When you know, there is none. There is no question. So the authenticity of knowing, I think, actually is bypassing all of the stuff that we attach to intellectually and glamorize as ways of sort of comprehending our world.
Some of us find it really easy to think that we know. And we fall into a certitude. Often it's ego-based.
Yeah.
But it's like, I know, and then what? So there's a self-delusion, right? Often it'll come out of a wound. The wound can bring you into a place where it's hard to tell. You get confused.
Yeah.
And then in your sense of wanting to get past the wound, you clutch onto a certainty, and then there's confusion.
But I think while that can be true with an attachment to a system, even a system of spiritual growth that we intellectualize and attach to, and this is the true way, I don't know that there is such a thing. I think that everything, I don't know that. I agree with what you're saying, but the purpose of these books, and this is one of the things that the guides have said again and again, they say, we don't write self-help books because essentially self-help is for the small self, and the small self doesn't fix the small self. It may try to move things around. It's like redecorating the living room, but it's not necessarily going to rebuild a foundation in a higher way. So if I understand what they're saying is that this question is answered through realization. Now, they say that realization and knowing mean the same thing. The realization of the true self, or the realization of truth, is knowing. The claim, I know who I am, is not made by the small ego self, because the true self knows, the small things assumes. I can say, I'm a man of so many years living in New York City, I can list the things that I can identify as in the world, but if I want to make that my truth, I'm dealing with a very transitory reality. I'm not always going to be this age. I may not always live here. I may not always be a man. Who knows? You know what I mean? There's a whole other way. When you move beyond the emblemization that we give to everything and the importance we attach, then we actually have the opportunity, I think, to realize ourselves.
Is there a particular way you suggest for people to read the books? Because it sounds to me like, on the one hand, we tend to read books with our thinking, with our mind.
Yeah.
And we're looking for an understanding. And what you're suggesting is that the books are more about a vibrational relationship to the text or a feeling.
Yeah. The guides say this, and they say this in pretty much every book, but they've said it from the beginning. They said that the book is operating on two levels. There are the words on the page, which will give you an intellectual context for whatever this experience is, but the real book is written in vibration and is working directly with the reader. So people that are reading the books are reporting all this phenomena attached to it. I'm reading the book. I mean, it's interesting. Up on Amazon, you see the reviews. I'm reading the book and my body's vibrating. I'm reading the book and I'm seeing auras. All of this stuff begins to happen with people who are actually operating with the books as a teaching, not just as an intellectual experience. Now, I'm challenged by this because I'm the channel, and it's hard for me as the channel to have that same experience as somebody who's neutral to the material. It's kind of like asking the radio to dance to the music. I'm so busy playing the music and keeping up with the transmission that I don't get to just receive and have that same kind of experience. But in terms of how to approach the books, I'm going to get it from them one at a time. They're saying one at a time and carefully. That's enough, and that's enough. So that's it from them.
So, do the books work best in order? I mean, are they meant to be read in order?
I would say yes, but it's not necessary. The guides are pretty, they say, and I think they say this in this book, they teach in a one-room schoolhouse. So they get everybody in the same room, just like this room, and some of you have been on a spiritual path for many, many years, and some of you are just opening up, and they're meeting everybody where they are and getting everybody up to the same speed so they can go on the journey that the book intends. So and surprisingly, it involves very little repetition from book to book. I think they're good teachers. I mean, I think that they know how to support us in an ongoing way. So a lot of people are entering in with whatever book they happen to be given or find on a bookshelf, and then they find themselves going back to the others.
Is it a practice? Is there a practice emerging out of these books?
Yes. I hear yes from them, yes. Yes, I mean, I get a little uncomfortable sometimes because I've noticed that there's sort of a lexicon building around this work. And I'm going, wow, people are sort of talking about this stuff with sort of in-speak who are doing the work. And I think that's my small self-concern. I think it's fine for people to communicate.
What are you concerned about?
Well, I mean, I don't like anything that feels like a club, to be honest with you. I just don't. And I mean, the guides have been very clear about that. And I don't think that would ever happen with this work, because this work is too much too much about the individual honoring their own knowing and honoring their own will in order to sort of become supplicatory to a teaching. The practice, though, basically, I don't think it's a new practice. I think it's a practice that's present in a lot of new thought, but it's the awareness of the divine in manifestation is much of the practice. God sees God in everything, and the divine sees the divine. As you align to that level of consciousness, which they're supporting you in doing, you're actually seeing the world and then lifting the world to be in co-resonance at that level. And they say this is how the world is changed. The world isn't changed through condemning the things that don't work. The world is changed by witnessing what can, or the divine essence in anything, and lifting it. And that's the work that they're doing. And it's powerful, powerful stuff. They say that everything you see before you, even in this room, was given a name by somebody who came before you. So every time you walk out of the house, you're walking into a museum. That's a store, and they're selling shoes, and I need shoes because we all need shoes. And I need a job because you have to have a job. I mean, this whole collective agreement of a way of being in the world is something that we're actually sort of stuck in. But there are many, many different ways to begin to realize who we are. And as we do that, we're actually transforming the reality that we're participating in.
As a practice that you see coming out of the books,
Yeah.
it's quite different than Buddhism, other sort of traditional mystical or, spiritual either religions or, lineages.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm wondering if there are certain lineages like that might be more resonant with the books. That are
I don't think so. I really don't. I mean, I've heard Jeffrey Kripal, who wrote the introduction to the Book of Mastery, is a scholar. He runs the religious studies department at Rice University. And he said this was a Gnostic teaching. It was he reminded him of 2nd century Christianity. Victoria Nelson, who's been on the phone for all of the books, disagrees heartily, and she feels it's a Hermetic teaching. And I've never read the Hermetica, but this has to do with sort of the realization of the divine in form. The Gnostics weren't happy about bodies at all. They thought bodies were we were sort of stuck in them. But the guides increasingly are talking about the realization of the divine in form. And this goes back to this whole idea in Christianity, or esoteric Christianity, of the Word made flesh, which is the realization of the divine as who and what you are. I think we can all get to this place sort of theoretically with, I must be, if there is a God or something like a God, then we're all part of it, so I can say that, we're all like sort of God. I can say that, like that Joan Osborne song, I mean, we can all sort of go there to that comfortable place. I don't know that we can go as comfortably to the idea or the realization, not the idea is thinking, realization that the divine is the what that you are in form. Now the manifestation of
say
this,
that again.
the divine as what you are. Now, when the guides work with energy, they're bringing through energy that's palpable. The claim, I know what I am, literally means I know the divine as what I am in the form I have taken and in this expression in this life. It doesn't mean I'm going to be nice to other people and I'm going to say namaste all the time and and take my yoga class. It can include those things, but it's not that. It's something I think much, much, much more real and profound. So the teaching of I know what I am, the divine is what you are, I think it's the essence, truthfully, of the Christ teaching without the religious stuff attached to it. I mean, they're really clear this is not religion, and they talk about religion in the books. And they say, religions are wonderful openings for people, in many cases, to come to something beyond it, but that most of the world religions have gotten too fraught with fear and organizational issues, politics. Yeah.
So the Book of Truth,
Yeah.
you referred to this before, but I'd like to maybe explore a little bit more, that the essence of the book feels like, from my reading of it, consciousness, in certain ways, essentially precedes matter.
Yeah.
That matter is an extension of consciousness.
Yeah.
Right? That the material arises out of a conscious agreement of all of us together, making the world in which we effectively co-create.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that and that the book kind of lays out a way for each of us to become more aware of how to attune ourselves so that we can detach ourselves from that aspect of the material world that is holding us down in order to attain a resonance with what that aspect of the self that can pull us upward.
Yeah, I think that's well said. I don't know, I think detaching is tricky because it's not about abandoning the physical world. It's about the realization of the physical world as an aspect of the divine as well. So this idea, because this is where I went early on in my spiritual journey, is I was really happy. I just wanted to float around all day on high energy. That was just so great. I didn't want to deal with the reality of life. And that you really can do that, I think, and be in the world.
But, we're also living in a society that gives primacy to the material world, generally. Most people, the scientific worldview is often thought of as a potentially materialist way of being.
Yeah.
And when you talk to folks who are coming from that place, when you say that consciousness precedes matter, consciousness precedes material, they'll like go, huh? They don't, it's very hard to have that conversation with people who are not already somehow experiencing that in their own lives.
See, my guides don't really talk that much. I mean, they may, and other people here may know the books better than I do, truthfully, because they're people that study these books. But the guides don't talk that much about consciousness preceding matter. They talk a lot about how we're actually in vibratory accord or agreement to everything in the material realm, and that's all about co-resonance. So they say, everything you see before you, you're agreeing to by nature of the fact that you're seeing it. It really couldn't be there in relationship with you without your accord or agreement. That doesn't mean we chose it. It doesn't mean that I made the war happen in Iraq. It does mean that if I see the war in Iraq, I am actually in relation to it And the consciousness that I hold is informing it and can actually support the transformation of it. Does that make any sense? And that's a little bit different than the teachings of I'm creating this and I'm creating that. And my guides aren't that big on that teaching. It's not, they say, it's not the teaching of how to get a bigger apartment or, a better looking boyfriend or girlfriend. That idea of attraction is there, but the guides are saying who is claiming, what aspect of you is claiming anything into reality? Is it the small self who thinks what being happy is this checklist of things that we've inherited, or the true self who knows what he or she needs to realize him or herself through? And they say the true self does know this. So in that level of alignment, you're automatically moving into a level of co-creation in a higher way, and you're not looking at the universe as a shopping catalog of the things that you think might make you happy if you get them. Do you understand?
So there are certain terms that are used in the books that they have a certain kind of fuzzy feeling or meaning for a lot of in a kind of spiritual context. And I'd love to hear a sense from you what you feel that these words mean. For instance, at one point in the book, there's a quote: "Everything is a field of vibration." What is vibration?
Well, they're saying everything is in tone. If you wish to use the word tone, the idea of tone or sound equivalent or sound in equivalent is something that you understand. You hear the note C, and you're in response to it, and you are in response to it. The vibration of the C, the vibration of the C is in agreement in your field, vibration. If you think of vibration as emanation, not only as emanation, but tone, you can understand that the tone that you play, is in vibratory accord, at multiple octaves. The high C is still a C, the low C is still a low C, the low C is still a low C. The tone is played at different scales, as you escalate consciousness, period. And they're saying period.
In that description, we're using tone and vibration in a kind of metaphorical way or a literal way?
Let me ask them both. They're saying both. It's a very good metaphor. It's a very good metaphor. The piano is a wonderful metaphor. The piano is a wonderful metaphor, but your idea of consciousness seeks to be framed through the comprehension that you've inherited, the language we would use. So the language that we would use to describe our teaching for you, would be limited by what you can agree to, Now the divine is you. Now the divine as you is operating in high vibration, the collective vibration. The collective vibration you hold is fraught with history, and the expectations for history, and the expectations born in history as you realize yourself as the divine self, the field that you hold, and field and vibration may be used, and field and vibration may be used not concurrently, but in an exemplar way, to lift the field. The field claims the new to you in a higher agreement. If you imagine that the pitch that you sing at calls everything it reaches to like a chord, you can understand this teaching.
So there's a lot of work now that's being done around the ability for sound, for tone, to affect physical healing. They're looking at the way that the body physically resonates as part of the resonance of all of matter. Right? And physics is leading us to a deeper understanding about how things really do vibrate all the time. So there's a literal aspect to vibration.
Which I wouldn't know, because I flunked earth science. And
Me
I
too.
actually did. Or I got a C, kind C.
Right. Yeah.
But no.
But are the guides interested in the literal aspect of that?
Well, I hear yes and no, but not as we teach through Paul, period. Now, there's a reason. This is something that they've said, and I'll say it because they've said it's actually important. They say that they don't use the language of science in their teaching because the language of science is always predicated on the age in which you happen to be in. So, for example, now you hear about people saying, I'm getting a download, I'm downloading all this stuff, because the culture we live in gets downloads. In 50 years, that's going to be archaic. Do you understand? So when they talk about science, I think they've mentioned DNA symbolically twice in their teaching about encoding, or maybe twice. I rarely hear it. I think they mentioned the internet once, and I think it was an error, because it felt so unnatural coming out in the context. And that was in a live stream, that wasn't in a book. It was in a teaching that they were doing. And they talk about, now they mention computers. They used to call the computer a television. So am I going to hear from so-and-so? Yes, on the television. Meant it was going to be that. So they don't use a language. And they actually say that the teaching that they're giving us is valid 1,000 years ago and is as valid 1,000 years from now, that they don't want to, I think, bring it into pop culture or the science of the moment.
Because a similar question I had about when you use the word field, I think of, morphic resonance field, the Rupert Sheldrake's idea.
I haven't read Sheldrake, so you see, you may be talking exactly their language and I wouldn't know it. I'm taking dictation, so that's the difference. So I think my sense is that they use their language very carefully. I think they choose their words quite carefully, but the attunements that they bring through are done through language. So people are having these experience of vibration, for lack of a better word, the feeling of the energy or the current, through the invocation or incantation of these claims or attunements. And so that's how they're working with us, is through, again, sound and tone. And that's how all of the books are operating.
Another phrase that they use is free will. And they give a lot of importance to free will and our ability to choose. What do they mean by free will?
Well, they mean in this case, they mean who's choosing and what aspect of the self is choosing. Are you operating out of the historical data that you've inherited? I should want to go to college because everybody should want to go to college, because that's what one should do, which is inherited information. Or are you choosing as the true self? Now, the true self may want to go to college too, so there's nothing wrong there. So when they talk about free will, I mean, it's very interesting, because I was once speaking at a conference right after somebody who got up on the stage and said there is no such thing as free will. And I had to go up after that, and the guides went up there and did, I think, a 20-minute talk on why we have free will. And I never got invited. I don't think I'll ever get invited back to that one. But they do say that we choose. They say choice, choice, choice. You choose to choose. But who's choosing and why? And the idea of sort of responsibility at that level, I think, is highly important.
This one's not a particularly charged question, but I'm curious what they would say. What is God?
They say everything. God is everything. They've answered that. That's, I think, in the first book, God is everything.
So it's not a guy with a beard sitting on the throne.
No,
there's
it's
no
everything.
anthropomorphization of the idea.
I've never heard it from them.
Intention? Is there an intention to God?
To realize itself through all things, it's self-informed, to know itself in form and realize all as what it is, But as you are of God, you have the same intention. You have the same intention. You're all of this. You are all of this on the same passage. On this same passage, how you each learn and evolve in many ways, is predicated upon the requirements of the soul, and what it requires, and what it requires to realize itself through, the teaching you have received through us is to support the individual, is to support the individual and the collective as well, in higher realization, so that you may not be more to the choices you inherited, to the choices that you have inherited, which are leading you on a path of destruction. Period.
Is there feedback on the speaker? Is it just me? No.
There's an air conditioner right behind me too. So, yeah, something's humming. Now, I just wonder. I mean, do we want to take some questions from the floor?
I have one last question, and we can
Okay.
open it for everybody else. This is another easy question. So, the Christ.
Yep.
What is the Christ?
The Christ, they define it in every book. They call the Christ the aspect of the Creator that seeks to be realized in form. So the divine spark, the seed, the monad, whatever you want to call it. But the Christ is the aspect of the Creator that seeks to be realized in form. And now they say as who and what you are. The manifestation of the divine in form as you really is the essence of the teaching. And they say, and it's not a heretical teaching. It's basically the original message that we all got, you know, and it's the same, I suppose. I'm going to let them say it quickly, the divine as you. The divine as you and the divine and all, and the divine and all are not exclusive to any sect or any religion or any religion is the same. It is the same in any being, the word Christ as we teach it to realize the self as the true self. As the true self is to know the self, is to know the self in union, that is the purpose of the text. And that is the purpose of the text, period.
All right. I'm sure there might be a question out there somewhere. Does anybody have a question? Okay, here, why don't you take the mic?
Hi, how's it going?
Hey.
I have two questions. This one's going to be for the guides, obviously. Am I the only one here as you? This is for the guides. Am I the only one here as you?
That sounds like a riddle to me.
It's for the guides. I don't know. It's just like...
Yes and no. They're saying yes and no. You're not the only one here. You are not the only one here, and there are many here, and there are many here as who we are, as we realize ourselves, as we realize ourselves as the divine, we know who you are as well. We know who you are as well, to qualify the self. To qualify the self as independent, so self-separation is to know the self in separation. The teaching that we give you, does not diminish the individual, does not diminish the individual. It realizes the individual, but realizes the individual through the collective union that is always present, period.
Okay. And I have a question about requirements. What we actually need as divine beings. What do we actually require for ourselves?
What they say about that, I mean, there's a claim that they make in the Book of Mastery, and the claim is, I am here, I am here, I am here. They say that's the claim of the true self, as you. And that when you begin to work with that, and again, this isn't magical thinking and it's not magic words. These things work on the energetic attunement. What they say is, through this, then the true self begins to claim into manifestation what you require to realize yourself through. So what you may need to realize yourself through may be very different than the lady in the first row. But the claim will bring it with you or to you. Do you understand?
Yes. And the word requirement, like, it's something that, the way I understand, like, the way they teach it is that, like, it's something that you keep repeating in your reality, and it's like a little, like...
I haven't heard that from them.
It's something that you repeat, and it keeps coming up in your reality.
Well, if something that if you continue to call something to you in manifestation, it's there for you to learn through.
Is that a requirement?
So that, well, it could be a requirement. It's probably a requirement for you to realize what it is, so you can move beyond it. I mean, if I keep attracting relationships in my life that aren't serving me, is my requirement to realize myself in a healthy relationship and why these things stink? You know, that may be my requirement for growth. But everything that you see in your life, the guides would say, is an opportunity to learn through every situation. And the high ones, the low ones, whatever you would want to call them. So yes, if you have a repetitive situation, perhaps that is an opportunity for you to progress beyond it if the repetition isn't serving you. Okay?
Just, sorry. I'm asking, like, are you limited in that? Like, when you call in, you claim what you require, like, does that change?
Yeah,
Does what you
I think
require
it probably
change?
requires. What I required when I was 10 years old was for my mother to buy my clothes because I didn't have any money. You know, now I'm 55 and I can buy my own clothing, but I require other things as I progress. And I think the same thing is really true for how we evolve spiritually. I think the opportunities come as we need them and as we can claim them. I was told when I was, 29 or something, you know, I was told that by somebody else who read, that my real work wasn't going to kick in until I was in my late 40s. I was horrified because I thought, what the hell am I going to do? But I have to say that I would not have been ready to do what I'm doing now 15 years ago. I would not have been at all. My ego would have been much more involved. I had to get through the fear of what other people thought of me, which was a huge deal for me, truthfully. And now I don't care in the same way, but I still get my lessons. Do you see? So could I have? Perhaps. Was it the right time? No, because my progression was continuing. Okay? Thank you.
I'll do one. Hey, Paul.
Hi, Alan.
Good to see you. So, do you think there's a building of vibration as these books come out, and it's pointing to a something like a plateau, like a peak, and
No. They're saying yes and no, one peak and then others follow, one peak and then others follow. You all want to get to the top of the mountain. You all want to get to the top of the mountain because you think that there's no place else to go. There is always a higher mountain. There is always a higher mountain, more to be realized, more to be realized. The requirement for the individual, the requirement for the individual in a lifetime may be limited. How far you get, how much you comprehend, but the learning will continue indefinitely. But the learning will continue indefinitely because you incarnate to learn, because you incarnate to learn. This is a wonderful school you've enrolled in. This is a wonderful school you've enrolled in, if you see it as such, period.
I mean, as a body of teaching, these books.
Yeah, yes. I get yes, and more. So I feel that this trilogy has a point to it. I know, because they've said that there'll be other books beyond the trilogy, but for all I know, they're going to talk about why our relationships don't work, or what it means, what commerce really means. I mean, there's all this stuff that people ask about all the time, but their teaching has been so specific and frankly on target from the very first book. Are they going to continue this way? I don't know yet. I don't know.
We have a question over here.
Hi, Paul.
Hi.
Thank you so much for having the courage to channel these. They've been very meaningful to me, all the books.
Mm-hmm.
My question to you is regarding, since you're talking about the manifestation, the what we are, right? In terms of healing the body, do they have any?
They do. I mean, I think they're getting there. They talk. There's this second book, the Book of Love and Creation. They talk a lot more, I think, about this kind of thing, and that's the most dense book. That was like 500 pages. So I'll ask yes and no. They're saying yes and no. You have a body. You have a body. You're accountable to it. You are accountable to it. The awareness of the divine. The awareness of the divine in every cell. In every cell. Illumine every cell. Will illumine every cell. Every many of you call things. However many of you call things that you learn to you, that you need to learn to you through the body's changes. Through the body's changes. You may learn patience. You may learn patience. From being unable to get out of a chair. There are ways to learn it. There are other ways to learn it, but there may be a benefit. But there may be a benefit that can be claimed through any circumstance. So the idea that you should all live forever, that you should all live forever is not accurate. The body has its prime. The body has its prime. Its stages of realization, as does an oak tree, as does an oak tree. And you'll be born again, and you will be born again and resurrected in body, because you do incarnate successively. But the idea behind this moors you to linear time, which also is something we don't teach, which is essentially something that we don't teach. So let me say what I want to say about healing. The body can be healed, but it has to know itself as worthy of it. The body can be healed, it has to know itself as worthy of it. But some people learn things. But some people learn things through not being healed, through not being healed. Do you understand that?
Yeah.
Makes sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because for me, one of the ways that I serve, I'm currently limited in how I can do that right now. And I'm like, I don't know if that's, my higher self telling me to take a left turn, or am I supposed to fix?
I thought I was supposed to be a playwright. I got a master's degree in it. I taught it for 25 years, and I was actually pretty good at it. So that wasn't the issue. I didn't realize, and I may go back and do that again someday. I mean, that's quite possible, if that's where I feel called to do. But I didn't, if anybody told me that I would be sitting here with 8 years ago with 5 books in print and a 6th on the way, I would have thought they were out of their mind. I also had the worst writer's block of anybody I've ever met in my life. And I'm not joking. So the fact that books are dictated through me over a course of days, I find very ironic. But the idea of I know how I serve, which is the guide's teaching, is not how Paul serves as he thinks he is. It's how the true self realizes itself in the life you're living. So this idea that how we serve is our work or our career, I think is actually, again, an idea that we've all bought into. There's a woman who called in a question, because I do these live streams on Wednesday nights, and a woman called in, and this question's actually in the book of Mastery, because they delivered a lecture for that book, and we included the question on it. This woman said, you know, I want to know how I serve. I drive a school bus every day, and I bless all the kids when they get on the school bus, and I'm claiming the word and seeing the divinity in all of them, but what am I here for? And, you know, the thing is, she was doing it. Do you understand? The idea that it was supposed to be something that sounds right, or that what we're expected to do, I think probably some of the most talented musicians in the world may not be playing on a great stage, but that doesn't mean that their music isn't valid and changing the lives of the people that they do play for. So again, we have these inherited cultural structures that I think are crippling to most of us about who we think we're supposed to be, how life is supposed to look, what beauty is, all of these things that we end up just sort of utilizing as self-punishment. So I don't know if this answers your question, but I would suggest, if this is an opportunity for you, maybe not for rerouting, I don't know what your work is or what you think it is, but it may be just as well. Okay?
Thank you.
Thank you. There's some women, too? Yeah. Thank you.
Hello. I am very happy I can be here. My question is about judgment and fear.
Yeah.
And I just know the teaching and the teachers, the basic teaching comes from I will judge you and my judgment will be always out of some sort of fear.
Yeah.
And as I've been working with this thought, and as I've been realizing it through my life and doing some of the work, reading the books, there have been a lot of really amazing things unraveling in front of my eyes and changing within my work life. And specifically, I wanted to mention a situation where I started thinking kindly thoughts, although I would normally, my victim consciousness would think that I am being just basically treated unfairly. So with the fear, as soon as I started saying, I see it and I release it, I see it, I release it, I see it and I release it, the person that I was involved with started laughing, not laughing, but smiling. And all of a sudden we are both smiling. Yeah. And all of a sudden we're realizing this is so ridiculous. It's not even an issue. And we reached this plateau that was all loving and understanding, and we came from all of a sudden this feminine perspective, different than where we were before, very competitive job, mind space. And I wanted to ask the guys to again speak about fear and how it is a lie.
Well, one of their primary teachings, and what they say in every workshop that they do in every book, they say that the action of fear is to claim more fear. And that's what fear does. And they say if you look at your life and you look at every choice you've ever made in fear, see what it got you, which is probably more fear, more of the same. They also say there's not a lie that's ever been told that wasn't told in fear. So we have to sort of stay clean with that energetically and just, again, look at your lives. So I think that that's a simple way to look at it. I don't see anything else they want to say about fear. Well said. They just said, well said. That is the teaching. That is the teaching. When you align to fear, when you align to fear, you act in fear, or you act in fear. You go into agreement with it. When you agree with it, it's What you agree with, you shake hands with, and you hold, and you are in vibrational accord with. Stop shaking hands with fear. Stop shaking hands with fear, and stop listening to those who tell you you should be afraid. And stop listening to those who should tell you you should be afraid. You should be afraid. Okay? Thank you. Okay?
Hi, Paul. I just want to say thank you. I feel like some of this work is probably self-sacrificing, and I'm thoroughly enjoying it. And as I'm climbing the mountain, I have little children, and I feel like I really want to ask the guides, I feel like there should be more due diligence on my part how to relay that to them. How can I express this work to my children?
They're saying be it. Be it, be it, be it. Don't do it. Don't do it. Be it. Be it. Be the work. Be the work. Be the realization. Be the realization of it. Then you will know your children as who they truly are, as who they truly are. The mothering that you do, the mothering that you do will be informed by that truth, will be informed by that truth. Don't teach them the words. Don't teach them the words. Teach the expression of it as you. Teach the expression of it as you. That is the gift you would give children. That is the gift you would give your children, period.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Hi, Paul. Thank you so
Hello.
much. Can you talk a little bit about, or the guides talk a little bit about, like living from joy, heart-centered versus head-centered, and or connecting the two,
Oh,
and what the
God.
world might look like? Like once everyone's read these
I'm
books.
like this cranky old guy that has many lessons to learn about living in joy. So I'm going to turn it over. We would like to say only one thing. We would like to say only one thing, the knowing of who and what you are. The knowing of who and what you are aligns you to the heart, aligns you to the heart and to the truth of who you are, and to the truth of who you are, and that claim for you. And that claim for you is joyful, perhaps not what you think, perhaps not in the way you think, because most of you ascribe joy, because most of you ascribe joy to an outcome. What a joyous occasion. What a joyous occasion. This thing outside of myself. This thing outside of myself brings me joy, when the knowing of who and what you are, when the knowing of who and what you are in agreement to the true self, in agreement to the true self is present, your reality transforms. Your reality transforms. It's not a pretty reality. It is not a prettier reality. It is a higher one. It is a higher one. There is death in that world. There is death in that world. There is decay. There is decay. There is life. There is life. There is love. There is love. The full spectrum of experience. The full spectrum of experience may still be known to you, may still be known to you as the true self, the idealization of happiness, I will be happy at the end of this journey. I will be happy at the end of this journey. Keeps you all on a road. Keeps you all on a road to an unknown place. The knowing of the self is who you are. The knowing of the self is who you are. And the claim, I am free. And the claim, I am free. Free of what you were taught. Free of what you were taught or led to believe, will claim for you the world that is waiting for you, the world that is waiting for you. And yes, we say it is joyful, and yes, we say it is joyful, but only because you are in agreement to that, period. Okay? That made sense.
Hello.
Hi.
I have a question about truth and coexisting. So, for me to know my truth in myself, I feel mostly comfortable with that. But then when I coexist with others, it gets messy.
Yeah.
So, I find myself kind of insulating and holding in my
Yeah.
truth and my energy and withholding my love, and it creates like this circuit of like anger and resentment inside of me, therefore taking me even further from my truth. So,
Well, what I get is that you're operating in fear, and that's part of what's going on here. Now, once in a while, somebody will post a quote from one of the books on Facebook, and somebody quoted, I saw this, and somebody, I think it was a quote from the Book of Truth, and somebody said, well, we all have different truths, was the response. And I backed out because I don't comment on that stuff, but actually that's the antithesis of the teaching, that truth is subjective. You understand? Now, what I would suggest is that the knowing of who you are or claiming at that level supports you in the realization of who others are. That doesn't mean that people are going to do what we want, which is a whole other thing. One of the things the guides teach, and it's a simple teaching, it's kind of self-helpy, but they've been saying it for about a year to like a lot of people, is, you know, we have to forgive other people for not being who we want them to be or who we wanted them to be, because that's usually where we get stuck. So the one who betrays me, I wanted them to be the one who didn't betray me, and that's not what they are or what they were. Do you understand? It's a real simple adjustment, but what the guides say is that lets you off the hook, and it lets them off the hook as well. It doesn't mean, and the other thing is, and I think this is helpful, the guides have said many times, you know, you don't have to like everybody. That's not what this is about. There's an exercise that they do in the Book of Mastery where they say, okay, now you're all going to go into a cave. And in that cave is the one person you never want to see again as long as you live. And your job is to escort them out to the light. They say, because you put them there. And actually, they've called you into the very darkness that you say you don't want to be in. And they say again and again and again, it's a simple teaching, you cannot be the light and hold another in darkness. And that's really convenient. And right now, when we're looking at what we're looking at in the world, it's super convenient because we get to justify this stuff. But the guides also say that justification, self-justification, is always the small self, without exception. It's always the ego or the personality. They don't say ego much, they say personality structure. And they say the personality, in fact, is a structure. It has a reason for being there, but it's not the truth of who you are. So that's some stuff around this. And normally what I would do with this, I would go to you and I would tune into you and then hear the people that you're not having a good time with and find out what the common denominator is to try to move it. But that's what I do in my practice. Okay? Thank you.
Actually, I want to pick up on that last thought because, you know, we're living in a relatively interesting political situation.
Yeah.
And I know your own relationship to our president in your personal, like, in terms of like your attitude and thoughts about, I mean, many of us probably share a concern about what's happening in Washington and the way that our country is being led. And I'm wondering how you might extrapolate from that thought.
First of all, I'm going to say this because the guides have never talked about politics directly, you know, but they're also not the kind of guides that come out and say Princess Di was murdered by the Illuminati. That's somebody else's stuff who wants to go there. So I don't know. I'm going to see how they want to address this, you know, because I don't think you and I actually have talked politics. But if we have, I'll say, you know, my struggle always is with my desire to see what I want out pictured in front of me, and when it's not, I get pissed off, you know, and with who. So let me see what the guides want to say about dealing with this, knowing who and what you are. Well, here they go again. They're saying knowing who and what you are requires you, nobody else says, to know who everybody else is, regardless of what they present. And this is the challenge of the time. And this is the challenge of the time, that everything is divine. If everything is divine, so is the one you hate, so is the one you hate, so is the one you disagree with. You cannot have the convenience. You cannot have the convenience of disparaging others, and claim to be enlightened, and claim to be enlightened. That is the convenience of personality. That is the convenience of personality. People are foolish. People are foolish. They do foolish things. They do foolish things. They learn in foolish ways. They learn in foolish ways. But you're all here to learn. But you are all here to learn, as we have taught many times. As we have taught many times, humanity stands at a time of reckoning. Humanity stands at a time of reckoning, and a reckoning is facing oneself, and a reckoning is a facing of oneself and all that's created and all that one has created. The true self who does not operate in fear, who does not operate in fear, will call a new world forth, will call a new world forth in a higher way, The small self will be very happy. The small self will be very happy to disparage others, because that's what he enjoys, because that's what he enjoys. We're not saying people don't do things. We are not saying people don't do things that we would suggest are harmful to many, But you must look at your relation. But you must look at your relation to everything, to everything, including all institutions that you are complicit to, because you see it, you are in relationship to it. What you condemn condemns you as well. This does not mean you don't speak your truth. It calls people loudly. You may be called to speak it very loudly. You may be called to the streets to act. You may be called to the streets to act. Many are called in the ways that are the most appropriate to them. But knowing who you are requires that the action be done. Requires that the action be done in the awareness of the inherent divinity of all parties, not just the ones you agree to, Period. So they've said this, and I'm going to say this is in the book. And the Book of Truth was dictated last year, so it's before the current climate. And it's interesting to look at the book as an oracle. And the guide said the book is an oracle. It's in the very beginning of the book. But they say that truth is here and that it's a wave, and all institutions that are not in alignment with truth are going to have to be recreated or remade in a higher way. We can't continue to perpetuate what we've had. We have to start looking at it in other ways, with other potential, and I hope that that's a good thing. I just get from that it's not comfortable. We want to return to the known, and what we may have to do is move to something different than we've had.
Thanks. Let's do 2 more questions.
Hi.
Hello.
Do you have any advice for somebody who is new to channeling that's been happening recently?
To listening? Yeah, I would say be in your discernment. I think that's usually important. I meet people that are starting to open up periodically. I usually say the same thing. If anything that's coming through you is trying to teach you to be afraid or teaching you in fear, you're listening to low-level stuff. And I wouldn't give it energy. I would say thank you, no. Work with the protection. I like protection. It's not because I'm affirming that there are scary things out there, but I think it's like safe sex. You're foolish if you don't practice it. Do you know what I mean? My grandma, bless her, she's gone, was married many times. I don't need to tune into her on the other side to get relationship advice because she didn't succeed. So that discernment is important. The other thing to be watchful for, truthfully, is to watch out for messages or teachings that might seek to glamorize the individual, because that tends to be an appeal to the ego. So when I hear people say, well, I'm channeling so-and-so and I've been told that I am here to save the world, I go, oh, okay, somebody gets to save the world, I suppose. But my guides have always been pretty careful with me, I feel. I feel that I'm treated respectfully in this exchange. I really do. But I also don't get told. I don't get teachings about specialness from them as it relates to what I do, and I'm grateful for that, truthfully, because I think it's a trap. I also think that there's something to be said for studying with people that have been at this. I have a dear friend, Jeanette Meek, who's been a medium for many, many years, and I'll call her up for consultation if I want advice on, she told me the other night, I said, why aren't I losing weight? And she said, well, part of the reason is your central nervous system is so raw because you're channeling so much, you have a big buffer right now, and you've got to start meditating. And she's like, yeah, she's absolutely right, so that I don't need as much protection around me. See what I mean? It can be helpful.
Thank you.
Hi, Paul. Thank you for your service.
Thank you.
Is everything perfect?
They just said yes at the highest level. Yes, at the highest level, yes. But which octave you sing it? It depends on which octave you sing it, or which view you look out the window from, or which view you look out the window from. From the higher floor, yes. From the higher floor, yes. But if you're in the basement, you don't get to see the full picture. You don't get to see the full picture. So yes, everything is perfect. So yes, everything is perfect in the higher octave. In the higher octave, but you have things to attend to. But you have things to attend to that you have created here, that you have created here. Is that perfect, Paul asked? Is that perfect, Paul asked? Well, yes, in some ways, yes. Well, yes, in some ways, yes. But the opportunities to learn, to learn, regardless of how they project themselves, regardless of how they project themselves, are always perfect, but your experience of them may not be, period. So, yes.
Well, your experience won't feel good. But it'll
Pretty
still
much.
be perfect.
Yeah, that's, sounds like what I'm getting, more than accurate, so I get yes. But I do get, they use the example of, windows, looking out of windows from the higher floor and what you see as being very different than what you experience, So, yes and no. They're saying yes and no, how you experience anything. How you experience anything is the key, and how you choose to experience it. And how you choose to experience it is very much dependent on your realization of what you witness, the true self as you, who is here as you now, in each of you now has become a new world, has the ability to claim a new world into being through his witness. You must understand how powerful you all are. None of you want to know that. None of you want to know that because you can't play small anymore, because then you can't play small anymore, be the victim to the world that doesn't understand your needs. You cannot be a victim. You cannot be a victim and a master at the same time, period. Okay? You're welcome.
Paul, thank you very much.
Thank you.
So Paul is going to sign books for everybody who's got a book upstairs. So we'll set you up with a table upstairs, and we'll have elixirs and drinks upstairs for those of you who are thirsty. I apologize for the heat. We're getting the air conditioner